Studio Part 2, the SAltY road, the color of freedom. The first thing they noticed wasn't the sight of the ocean. It was the smell. Somewhere south of the Georgia line, the scent of damp pavement and industrial exhaust simply vanished. It was replaced by the smell of pine needles, sun-baked asphalt, and eventually that sharp electric tang of salt in the air. As they crossed into Florida, the world turned technicolor. The girls, Maya and Lee, pressed their faces against the van windows, watching the palm trees whip past like giant green feathers. The 1998 Ford Econoline, their vessel, wasn't just a vehicle anymore. It was a lifeboat. Mark felt the steering wheel vibrate in his hands, but for the first time, it didn't feel like a chore. It felt like a pulse. On the roof, the old orange longboard hummed in the wind, a low, melodic whistle that sounded like a song from a dream he had almost forgotten. The rhythm of the road. In New Orleans, they parked on a side street near Marigny. The air was thick enough to chew, tasting of jasmine and spice. They sat on the van's bumper, sharing a single bag of hot beignets, watching a street trombonist play for the moon. There were no bills in the mailbox here. There was only the rhythm of the brass and the realization that they were, for the first time in years, completely invisible to the system. They pushed west, then south. The border into Mexico was the true threshold. The gray suburbs of their past felt like a lifetime away. In Baja, the desert met the sea in a violent, beautiful collision. They met a community of van lifers at a spot called Scorpion Bay. These were people who lived by the tides, not the clock. Around a driftwood fire, Mark met an old traveler named Santiago who looked at the orange longboard and nodded. "That board has a good spirit," Santiago said in Spanish. "It's been waiting for you to wake up." That night, Mark paddled out for the first time in 15 years. The water was cold, but it felt like a baptism. When he caught his first wave, a long, peeling right-hander, the mana returned. It wasn't about the speed, it was about the connection. He wasn't a logistics worker anymore. He was a part of the Pacific, the jungle pulse. The journey became a blur of dusty roads and vibrant markets. They navigated the humid green labyrinths of Guatemala and the volcanic coastlines of El Salvador. The girls were no longer apartment kids. Their skin was bronzed by the sun, their hair lightened by the salt, and their eyes were filled with the distance of the horizon. They were learning more from the tide pools and the locals than they ever had from a screen. In Panama, the rain returned, but it wasn't the cold, depressing drizzle of the north. It was a warm, tropical deluge that smelled of earth and life. They spent a week stuck in a small village while a bridge was repaired. Instead of stressing, they taught the local kids how to balance on the longboard in the shallows. Sarah traded some of their old tools for fresh mangoes and local coffee. The debt was gone, not because they had paid it all, but because they had outrun the world that valued them only by their bank balance. They were rich in sunsets and and stories. The final sanctuary, Costa Rica, the road through the Nicoya Peninsula, was the toughest, yet potholes the size of bathtubs and rivers to ford. But as they crested the final hill above Santa Teresa, the engine of the van finally went quiet. Before them lay a crescent moon of white sand. The jungle canopy was so thick it seemed to spill into the surf. The water was a clear, impossible turquoise, and the waves were rolling in with a majestic, ancient frequency. They walked the beach until they found it. A small, weathered shack tucked under a cluster of almond trees. It was simple wood, tin, and a porch that faced the sunset. It didn't have a for sale sign. It had a soul. An old man sitting on a stump nearby looked up and smiled. "You are the ones from the van?" he asked in English. "I was told you were coming." Mark looked at Sarah. She wasn't looking at a ceiling with water stains anymore. She was looking at the ocean. The girls were already running into the shore break, their laughter lost in the roar of the swell. Mark unstrapped the orange longboard for the last time. He leaned it against the porch of the little house. He realized then that the journey hadn't been about traveling 5,000 miles. It had been about finding the way back to himself. The sound of the gray world was gone. Now, there was only the sound of the swell.